And a summary of the DOS terminology: directory, DOS prompt, path, prompt, syntax, and wildcards. So let's see what the definitions are here. Directory, location for storing files. The DOS prompt, display the active drive and directory. The path command, address, or the path is an address to a file. It just tells you how to get to a particular file. These things can be very varied. And then a prompt, it's a user interface provided by CommandCom. And syntax, correct format for typing a command. And then we have wildcards like the asterisk star and question mark, and it's used to expand a file search. So they were aids in helping you find files. We still use these today. So the difference between the asterisk and the question mark, just for completion here, the asterisk could be representative of one or more characters. The question mark was one character. So if you had question mark, you could have two characters of any kind in between whatever search you were doing. For example, if you were searching for the word timber, the E and the R could be represented by question mark. So you could say, I want to search for anything that starts with TIMB, and that has two more characters, and then it would show up. The config sys commands: buffers, country, device, device hide, DOS, FCBS, files, install, last drive, mouse sys, numlock, shell, and switches. Just know these for the test. You're never going to use these in real life. But these were things we had to configure back in the day. Device high. Man, that's so old. Nobody uses that today. But you may find you have some old games that won't run on your systems. Like there were some old versions of Load Runner, which were really cool back in the day. But nobody probably wants to play those today, except for old guys like me. And then you might want to still load these in. And then there was a time I was working at an Air Force base, and we had to use some old programs that were still around that talked to the specific device. And we had to get an old version of MS-DOS 622 and put it on a machine. There were all kinds of problems we ran into. So I said, look, let's just put this thing inside of a modern Windows computer. So we got a new computer. We got Windows running on it, and we installed this old VM technology, old DOS 622 in there, and it worked perfectly. So you may run into these problems. If you do, just use a VM, contain the thing, and be done with it. Don't try to wrestle with it and try to get it to load on the system. Configuring all this stuff can be a nightmare. So don't mess with it. Just use a VM if you run into these problems today. And again, know this for the test. You won't have to mess with this stuff in real life. Autoexec.bat commands: DOS key, echo, keyb, mouse, exe, path, pause, prompt, set, share, and smart drive. You may mess around with some of these in autoexec.bat commands today, but we have languages called scripting languages that have kind of completely made this obsolete. So we would use Python and stuff for things like this. There might be some autoexec.bat commands out there, and people become experts with these, but they're very limited. And people will quickly jump off and stop using this and use like Python, the more scripting languages. They're incredibly powerful, and I highly recommend that you learn that instead of focusing on the autoexec.bat commands. If you wanted to know what any of these were, at the command prompt you could type DOS key, for example, space / ? And you would get help on the command. Also, a quick Google search would probably give you the same thing. File system basics. The file system organizes data on the storage medium. Different media require different file systems. File systems define name, conventions, file size, and media capacity. Magnetic media employ several different file systems depending on the OS. I mean, this is true. You can abstract anything you want basically on anything. So a wide variety of things going on here. So key file system terms, you need to know these for the test. EOF is an end of file marker. You will run into this one today. A file allocation table, FAT, that you will see on a limited basis. Everything's FAT32 or more probably today. FAT32 you still see around. File format, file handling, file locking, these are all relevant terms today. Block, boot disk, boot sector, cluster, dual boot, encryption, all of these things are somewhat relevant today, especially the encryption, the dual booting. But dual booting usually you have more than two, so it's multi-boot. And file name, folders, format, low-level format, master boot record or MBR. Partition tables, primary partition, sector, track, and volume, all of these are relevant terms even today. Comparing and choosing file systems. So the decision factors, dual boot requirements, do they support it or not? Number and size of hard disk drives, that's relevant, right? Do you want each OS on its own disk? Maybe if you're running a hypervisor, everything's going to load on its own, so this is irrelevant. You might even abstract the hard drives and just have one thing that you write to, and then it figures out what it's going to put on what drives. RAID, for example. And then size of partitions, that's important. How big is the OS partition versus the data partition? And need to support legacy applications. Do you have to support legacy applications? And need for advanced features such as security settings and configurations. The reason those are important is the need for advanced features such as security is because they may require space and stuff like that. Space for storage of data, things of this nature. So you need to figure out what you're going to put on what partition. FAT-based file systems or FAT-based file systems. All modern PCs can use FAT. Again, we use FAT32 today, and NFS file systems as well. So FAT organizes files by listing them in a table. 2 copies of the table are maintained on the media. The reason they do that is in case one becomes corrupted. FAT was developed for and is still used by floppy disk drives. There are 3 versions, FAT 12, 16, and 32. Again, the 32 is still around.